It's not looking good for DayZ. After waiting months for an update that still arrived broken, there have been countless other issues that, honestly, I think has put DayZ in the worst position it's been in over 10 years. And I might just be a regular old house cat, but I also think there's some bad news with the DLC too. But if you like the video, please leave a like or a subscribe, it really helps me out. But without further ado, let's get into the video.
So, apparently I've travelled so far, I've entered the world of Minecraft.
There's a lot to say here, but let's just break a few things down first, because if you're a DayZ player, I really think you should hear some of this stuff out, especially because I don't think the Badlands DLC is coming this year. Starting off, yeah, we finally got the update and it took me a little bit longer to check it out due to issues I had here, but I now have my consoles back, it's all fine. But after playing the update, a part of me kind of wishes I never had them back to begin with. And I am completely surprised this Ubisoft level of quality control reached full release. It's so bad players and streamers were calling for them to roll back the update to a previous version. We all knew that there would be some teething issues with an update of this magnitude. I just don't think we expected the impact that they've had, because in the developer's defense, although it doesn't appear that way, this is one of the largest updates DayZ has had over the last few years, and it eventually should develop into one of the largest improvements for console too. It's clearly taken a lot of time and effort, and I think anyone who's following along now understands exactly why we almost certainly never will get a full engine upgrade, because it's just not doable. But what confused me the most was why such a catastrophically bad idea was brought to DayZ in the first place. Ignoring the teething issues with the update itself, let's focus on crossplay, because even when there are features or directions I personally disagree with, I can usually still understand the reasoning behind them. I've said this before, I like the developers and I think they often get far more criticism than they deserve. Every interaction I've personally had with them or heard from others has been generally positive, but bringing crossplay into DayZ, even if it's restricted to keyboard only servers, felt like a decision that completely ignored the realities and wider landscape of the game. It overlooked the core issues players have been worried about for years, and in my opinion, it was an incredibly tone-deaf move. And for some players, especially when combined with the newer problems that have appeared alongside it, it genuinely has ruined the experience for them. And yeah, this is kind of the part where we talk about cheats. Now, the thing about cheats and cheaters and whatever else is, okay, first, so mental health is a very important thing, and if you struggle with it or if you need to reach out to somebody, I always encourage you to. I understand what it's like. I've experienced it with people around me. They sit there, they feel they're useless, they feel like they add nothing to the world, and they want to give into these thoughts, and it's a very, very difficult thing to deal with. I understand, my sympathies are with you. Please reach out to somebody if you struggle with it. That being said, if you struggle with it and you're a hacker, maybe give in to the thoughts. Now, obviously, I don't mean the big F11 in the sky. YouTube's terms and service would never allow me to suggest that. But at least listen to the part that tells you you are probably a terrible person. But anyway, hackers, or as I like to call them, cheaters using nefarious tactics and scripts, are a problem. They are. So I don't quite understand the reason behind the decision. In fact, I think the only rationale I can think of here, and this isn't confirmed anywhere, but I think you'll agree, it kind of makes sense, is that there's a sense that someone's tugging at strings that might not need tugging, specifically someone outside of the dev team, someone maybe more corporate. Now that DayZ solidified itself as a major player and earner for BI in recent years, it makes sense that the corporate side is focused more on profits. It's like they've Googled what do people want in games without actually understanding what the game needs. DayZ is not and will never be like other games, and that's what works in its favor. Now, this is just pure conjecture, but it reminds me of when Metal Gear Solid 5 was in development. You had Kojima with his creative vision and Konami pulling in another direction because they held the purse strings. Once the game came out, it became clear which part were Kojima's untouched artistry and which bits bore the marks of interference. It was an excellent but extremely inconsistent game to play, because the thing about making games is some players don't realize that every game developer leaves their specific mark. It's like a signature or a fingerprint, and often you can identify the creators before you even know their names. Sometimes you can even see when certain directors or developers have switched companies. It's not just the engine, it's the entire ethos, the mechanics, the direction, the feeling, the approach, the cutaways. It's in the pace and the structure. You get the same things in literature. You can tell the author without reading the books. You can't change voice. And with DayZ, it feels like there's a tug of war behind the scenes, nudging the team down a path they wouldn't naturally take. Again, conjecture, but it's the only rationale I have for some of the more recent bad decisions. And you can sort of see this in how they've tried to implement crossplay across console and PC, something some players have been asking for. But anyone who actually knows DayZ, any veterans or active players, probably understand why this was never going to be a good idea. Console has its own issues, like duping, but it's also been one of the few escapes from PC hacking. And while hacking isn't as bad as it used to be, it's definitely improved over the last few years. It still exists, and it only takes a small number of people to completely ruin an experience. And if you've put 20 or 30 hours into a character, built a base, maybe even found a community, or even just have friends you meet up with regularly, one hacker is enough to destroy all of that. Now they've brought this to Xbox, and the problem is that Xbox doesn't really have a proper defense against it. Yet they want and try to introduce BattlEye and similar systems, and to be fair, BattlEye is effective to a degree. And I know this is a very divisive topic, but I'd argue that it's a pretty good anti-cheat for a game like DayZ, especially given how difficult an always online MMO game is with hundreds of systems working and syncing simultaneously is to monitor. Nothing is realistically going to be great, but BattlEye is a good fit in theory for this type of game. But as I said, DayZ is an always online sandbox game, and games like that never really have fully effective anti-cheat systems. It's just impossible to do. It's also not the newest of engines. So while BattlEye helps and absolutely does a better job than having nothing at all, it doesn't completely solve the problem. It supplements things, it reduces issues, and it catches a lot, but it's still far from perfect and the problems are still there. But it also doesn't solve the biggest issue of them all, the biggest one that we have to deal with, and that is people are trash. They are. No matter how far you lower the bar for society, some people will find a way to limbo under it with a smile. The second crossplay games exist, every cheater left the normal PC servers and flooded the Xbox ones, because if there's one thing PC players hate, it's console players. And now they're combining the two worst parts of DayZ, duping with cheating, and they're all just cowards hacking online due to extreme skill issues. But this does present a big problem for DayZ players, and the problem is a few things, and it affects console and PC separately. This update was delayed and released in the state it's in, needing some hard TLC. That is not a good sign for two reasons. One, they haven't even added this to PlayStation yet, meaning we have to go through it all again, because you can bet anything PlayStation will have its own issues, most of which they will likely have remedies for, considering this is sort of the trial upgrade for console. So the PS5 should technically be smoother to implement it on, but it's likely still going to impact the new DLC Badlands, and here's why. Firstly, they haven't even finished this update yet. It was delayed by months and months, setting the entire team and schedule back because Badlands still needed significant work when they announced it. It was announced much earlier in development than Sakau was, so I don't see how they can be fixing the issues on the current patch and maintaining the release schedule going forward. So therefore, I think it's possible in a few months we get a notification from the team to say that the DLC may be delayed until 2027, which as long as it works, I'm personally fine with, but I'd rather us know the delay sooner rather than later. Again, they haven't confirmed this or even suggested it. This is just me going off what I believe to be common sense. But the other issue is, it seems as though they're updating the console version for a reason, and it's possible it needs to be completed before the DLC comes out. If not for practical and software reasons, then probably for logical ones. The DLC will need attention when it drops, lots of attention. It's bringing lots of new systems with it, and probably core gameplay changes as well, which are not simple or easy. As I said, I think the devs get a hard time sometimes because people don't understand the sheer magnitude of these changes they're making. They see mods releasing quickly and think it's the same level of development schedule, when it's not even remotely similar. Either way, I don't see how they can manage to maintain and develop the console versions and release the DLC within the time frame they've suggested, given how much of a delay we've received. But until then, they can either roll back to a previous version, which would definitely be welcomed, or, and this is my big suggestion for the DayZ team, I think DayZ need to employ a specific task force to tackle these cheating issues once and for all. They have the budget, and they could call it something like strategic tracking of players deploying obvious illicit network glitches, scripts, tampering, unfair practices, intrusions, dupes, suspicious hacks, and illegal tactics. Yeah, let's call it that. But for more DayZ information, click here, or for something else, click here. And as always, until next time.